Hi, welcome our channel Tech Science. The what is the 5G for? As the mobile operators offer the first 5G subscription to the general public, the new standard the telecommunication rises, the doubts and resistance. The CNRS senior researcher, the Philip Overjaki, the present issue of the involved. The present of the growing the 5G fast and the COVID-19 need the cellular the network and hence the throughout all the first reasons for the generation change to 4G to 5G. Users who have the increasingly cooked on streaming to mobile devices want to devise videos, watch the 4K on their smartphones, even though this the questionable interest given in size of the screen. These sunshines the demand on the saturation 4G are fueling the development of new services, especially the professional. What is the primary changes? Maybe the in my opinion the 5G provides two things that 4G lacks: differentiated classes, the services on softwareization. Three classes of serve will soon to be available will characteristic that are the specially adapted to users needs to the application. To start with the standard service compared to current cellular network, but is a significant increase throughout the URLLC. On other hand, target applications to have the temporal constraint. It is much the lower latency and hence greater reactiveness. The finally with MMTC, the 5G can standardize the communication for the Internet of Things in which the numerous the protocols coexist today. The three classes of server come with the network architecture type now as a network sizing which can cut up the communication matrix for time, frequency, resource into different slices. The each of which the provide users with the desired quality of the service and isolate the from another order avoid of the COVID-19, the effect of the 5G at the same time, the softwareization to make the network the programmable, who know the inventation the required on their physical infrastructure. They will therefore become more flexible to manage and will the integrate the new services more easily. For example, the user mind the changes will more the straightforward to adapt the throughout offer the specific service without physically changing the network hardware such as instrument the control the attendance. This notion of a software defined the network is fashion. Bricks have been gradually added to 4G, but this the principle will be native to the 5G. The moreover that the 5G is dynamically programmable, artificial intelligence could even be used to optimize the communication on what is the specific the functions of the 5G form. The 5G services the interest the professional and researchers the some handle very high definition video data during the extremely the high throughput such as the French Space Agency CNES, which uses a satellite and cellular mobile network to transmit the remote sensing the cellular the liquid also control the factories and various the process and the distance with very short reaction times. Along the same lines, I believe that one of the central application will involve the autonomous or connected vehicles. Their onboard artificial intelligence has shown the limitation has it not effective or rapid enough in decision. The making it every tenth of the second counts when it comes the braking to avoid the pedestrian. The centralization even on services of the code the facilities to integration of general driving condition such as the state of the traffic of road scenes and will also after better the calculation for the will performed by the more powerful machines that electronics in a car. This will considerable the improve the functioning the connecting the vehicles all through these instruction must also the transmitted with the throughout and the reactivity that only the 5G can provide at the stage. The principle is not the stuff of the science of friction. On the local, the experiment will be conducted shortly. The low latency services are also interest for remote surgery. The specialist operating remotely must have the same visual rendering for the guests has when they are the physically present with the patient. The next point was the contribution has the 5G made to reaches in the telecommunication. The network the slicing which the making the possible the reserve the slice of the 5G cellular the network on the conduct trials the real environment. As these the slice or the isolated on another experiment will the flexible on the slice without taking the risk that the problem might affect our rest of network, but we are the not quite there. The 5G the slicing the network will still to use the experimental the platform such as anchoring the chambers which are not the distributed by the external waves and prevent user interfering the operational functioning of the 5G network. The what does the development of the 5G is the states of the today. The technically the speaking we are the transitions to the 5G, but in terms of the service we mainly have access to a kind the high speed of the 4G. The 5G the network the deployed the kind of the use of the frequency brands that dedicated to 5G. But the almost the people's allocation the mechanism for the HETS resource are not yet the optimized effectively the really to the full available spectrum. It is important to note that the difference between 3G, 4G and 5G generation lies in the frequency bands on the media assets the techniques they use. The software and service side will not change that drastically between 4G and the 5G that is correctly installed. But this the evolves very quickly, especially with the upcoming the contribution of features. The 5G standardization process that should normally completed in the 2023. The what do you know about the health and environmental the risk of the 5G? In terms of the energy, the development of the network will the course of the consume the electricity, but I think I will comparable to the used by the 4G, the disappearance of 2G and the attendance. On other hand, should be allowed the some energy saving. I don't see how it were the revolution. We are consuming more the electricity in general and the worst will the remain the normal curve of the increase beside the 5G will help the reduce the amount of electromagnetic waves emitted. Its massive antennas will the target the locations where demand in high rather than the cover large areas indiscriminately. And as they increase the throughput will require more power, it is still the difficult to provide a process of the assignment. The with regard to health, we already had those debates when the previous generation we launched the cellular network having been the operating for approximately 30 years on today everyone uses the mobile phone without giving it is a second thought. We have not seen an increase the incidence of brain cancer. One of these the disease that could have been the caused by the those network, and while their higher relevance of neurodegenerate conditions such as Alzheimer's, the phenomena is rather attributed to the longer of the life of the expiratory. I would nonetheless like to point out is I am not the specialist on these health matters which I do not work on. I am only the quoting the results the studies that I have read. Still the some kind of the factors the 5G in France with the government the commissioning the studies to get the better grasp of impact of the health and energy consumption. The what is the electrocommunication hold in the store? The we are already the beginning to talk about the 6G which the operates on millimetric the frequencies and the provides the even the generated throughout the for now I prepare to speak of the 5G and after maybe the 5G and devices in many mobile phones are attracted in 5G on the decision of the solution form as we do not yet the throw of the next generation of the offshore. Now, thank you for watching, then likes and share and subscribe the tech news. Thank you. Goodbye.